and welcome to Capitol Hill, where the Treasurer Wayne Swan has revealed the softer side of the Razor Gang process, one he says that is not robotic and is occasionally emotional. But it's the medium term that may be causing him some more headaches. The mining boom may not mean that the coffers are full or that tax cuts will be raining down on our heads anytime soon. And he's acting Prime Minister now as Julia Gillard flies to Japan. Joining me to discuss the day's events are Liberal Senator Concetta Fierravanti-Wells and Labor MP Michael Danby. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Thanks, Linda.
Connie, do you think that the Razor Gang process does occasionally get emotional?
Well, I'm not sure what Wayne Swan means by emotional, but he's certainly been in retreat. It's very clear that Labor doesn't have a problem with the rivers of gold. I think his real problem is that Labor is now drowning very much in rivers of waste. And all we have heard from Wayne Swan is just excuse after excuse. First of all, you know, we're talking about he's got the excuse of Queensland, and then it's the Japan earthquake, then it's the mining boom. I can't understand how a mining boom that was brilliant under one government is now somehow detrimental under this government. And I think the reason is that the Howard government stood for economic responsibility, but this government regrettably stands for waste and mismanagement.
Michael Danby, does the government have itself to blame at least for some of the problems of having not enough money to do the things it might want to do?
Oh, well, I think if you're looking forward, I don't think that's true. We have different economic circumstances. The exchange rate is substantially different. I mean, the Australian dollar buys 105 US cents at the moment. That wasn't the case before, Connie. The attitude to personal savings is very different by the Australian people and by Australian financial institutions. You know, personal credit and business credit are very, very different. We're working in different circumstances, but overall the government's economically responsible. We're doing what Liberals would have praised in the past and trying to get the budget back into surplus. And look, I'm sorry to be a sunny optimist, but this country has less than 5% unemployment. It's 20% in Spain, 12% in the United States. Let's look at the positive side of things here.
Connie, you said that the government was making excuses, including the cyclone and the floods in those excuses, but weren't those things that had a real hit on revenue?
Well, certainly, but the reality is if this government hadn't squandered the money that they have on pink bats and on the Julia Gillard Memorial Halls, we would have more money in the coffers to do the things that are very important. We wouldn't be seeing on the front pages of the newspapers the campaign in relation to potential cuts of $400 million in medical research. We wouldn't see the threats to childcare. We wouldn't see in my own area of mental health, which was outlined as a second-term priority for the Gillard government, but regrettably we haven't seen any action in mental health. And because of all these billions of dollars that have been squandered, we now have a situation where massive pain will be inflicted on the Australian public. And that's pain because this government has wasted a lot of money. And that's, of course, before you start looking at the raft of taxes and, most importantly, the carbon tax, which will be inflicted on on the Australian public to help pay for the mismanagement of years of Labor.
Michael, the Treasurer said today that the government can expect a political hit from this budget, that there will be some pain. Can you afford a political hit at this time when you're also fighting battles on the carbon tax, on the mining tax, on the poker machines?
Sometimes when you're in politics you just have to grit your teeth and bear it. The government would get much more criticism if it did the economically irresponsible thing and didn't go to try and restore the budget surplus. I must say I get a bit annoyed with these lines about government waste. Every school classroom that I go to, and I do many openings outside my own electorate, there are members of the Liberal opposition there. If Connie or Andrew Robb or every Liberal that I know wasn't standing there with me, basking in the glory of these expansion of primary school infrastructure, I wouldn't feel it was so hypocritical. Now, there are other areas that they can legitimately criticise, but the school infrastructure program was very important in helping us address the issue of unemployed or potentially unemployed tradespeople during the global financial crisis. If you just look at Australia and the long-term economic history of the world, we did very well during the GFC compared to other countries. And it's no coincidence, it's because we've got a competent government.
But that was a long time ago. I mean, by the end of next year, we will have splurged a staggering $85 billion on so-called stimulus in this economy. I mean, we are now going to face a huge deficit, and that's before you start looking at mining taxes, flood taxes, and of course the carbon tax. We are borrowing at $100 million a day. I mean, this is a staggering amount of money. You have taken this country from surplus to deficit, and all because you couldn't properly manage money. I mean, this is the reason why this is the reason why Swan is retreating at 100 miles an hour.
I mean, the line about the government not managing money, in a global financial crisis, you spend to make sure that Australia doesn't slip into that economic recession that the rest of the world did, and now the government is being economically responsible by running or getting back to budget surplus. That's why we're being tough on some programs. We can't have the opposition decrying us for trying to get back to a budget surplus and then at the same time saying that individual programs should be supported here or there.
Michael?
And Connie, why do you and every Liberal come to the opening of every school classroom if you don't support the program? I mean, it's just, you can't, sit on both sides of the fence.
Michael, if we could move on to the issue of the Prime Minister's overseas visit, probably the most challenging part of that will be her trip to China. Are you reassured by her comments that she will be looking at human rights issues amidst the business agenda that she does have there?
Well, of all people, I must agree with the Chinese ambassador who said that Australia does have a different political ideology. We're a democracy. I'm sure the Prime Minister will raise these things as the previous Prime Minister Kevin Rudd did. We have a difficult situation that the Chinese government is very scared of the events in the Middle East moving to China, the Jasmine Revolution. They're arresting people all over the place. I know the Prime Minister will raise the issue of Australian citizens like Henry Yang and Stern Hu who've been arrested. But you've got to see this in the context of it's not the Prime Minister's fault, it's the Chinese government that's arresting even their most celebrated artist, Ai Weiwei. So, they're presenting us with a problem. It's not as if Australia is raising difficulties with the Chinese. We have a different system of government. We would not do the kinds of things that are being done in China. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will say that we want to have good economic relations with China, we want to trade with them, but we will not concede on the importance of the different democratic system that we stand for.
Connie, raising human rights issues, these things will inevitably cause some tensions in the relationship. Is it possible to really keep those tensions apart from the business relationship and ensure that the economic relationship continues on without a hiccup?
Well, certainly human rights, and as Julie Bishop pointed out the other day, the human rights and our concerns about human rights needs to be one of the issues to raise with the Chinese, but so does whether China is going to impose a price on carbon, and if so, what the timetable is for that. Because, of course, for us it's very important, the competitiveness of Australian jobs. And so it's important that Julia Gillard does get an answer from the Chinese about what their intentions are in this area. Also, there is the issue of a free trade agreement. It's actually, I think it's important that that process proceed, and it appears that certainly from a New Zealand perspective, their free trade agreement is progressing, and I think that it appears to have stalled under this government. So I think if we look at that agenda, apart from human rights, there is the issue of the carbon price and the competitiveness of Australian industry, as well as the other issues in relation to trade.
Michael Danby, Julia Gillard's a very different person to Kevin Rudd, the last Prime Minister to go to China. He had spent some time there as a diplomat. He spoke Mandarin. He in fact, when he was there, lectured the Chinese on what was happening in Tibet. Will her being a different person make the relationship easier, change anything at all?
I don't think lecturing people is her style, but she's a pretty firm person in negotiations, as people know. She's been very successful in keeping this minority government together with all of the legislation that's being passed, and I'd suggest that she'll be using that sort of same kind of steely firmness that I know that she has in personal discussions with the Chinese. I think that that's the effective way of doing it. And actually I agree with Connie that on the progress on what they're doing with carbon pricing is what we want to know, what they're doing to reduce the amount of dreadful pollution that they have in China. The odd thing about the Liberal position is if we do receive these assurances from China, does that mean that Tony Abbott and Connie Fierravanti-Wells will support carbon pricing? I doubt it. I think it's just political posturing. But I think it's an important issue for her to raise. I think it's very important too, Lyndall, that she's going to South Korea. We have a lot of important relations with the South Koreans. They're a middle power just like us. They've been very helpful in foreign aid across East Asia and the rest of the world. We're doing a lot of work together, and there's a lot of history that we have together. It's going to be symbolised by her being there for the 60th anniversary of the Battle of Kapyong that saved Seoul from being overrun.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Michael Danby and Concetta Fierravanti-Wells, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lyndall.
And thank you too for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow.
What is